And Ian, I was going to tell you too, I was noticing on our NCLUG registration page, there's a button there to click attended or check in. It might be because I guess their PE number is listed in there. So it may be that all you have to do is go in there and click check them as attended, and then you can print a report.
Right.
Hey guys, Patty.
Yes.
Should we have our cameras on or off if we're talking?
I think off is fine because I
Okay.
pinned Tim to the thing, which I think makes his the main screen. So I think everybody else will just populate in the bottom. But I guess that's up to you if you want your camera off.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks.
So
I was just checking.
at 12, I'm going to mute everybody but Tim.
Gotcha.
So.
Excuse me, I am Audrey Burnett with RK&K, and I have joined through the phone instead of the Teams meeting. Hello?
Yes. And that's fine, Audrey, but did you register on our website to attend the event?
I did. Yes, I did.
Okay. And I think we'll make note of that in our introductions, that if you called in, that you'll just need to make sure you tell us what your phone number was so that we can pair you with pair your name with the number.
Okay. So, and then do you get a certificate through the email that you attended, or?
Yeah, you'll get a receipt, a PDH receipt emailed to you after probably next week.
Okay. Because I'm not sure how to get on through the Microsoft Teams. I tried it, and the only dialing, it looks like, is just all the company, the people, you know, that work at my company. I don't see how to dial an outside number or how to join to an outside.
And I think if you click the link that said join here, it should have automatically opened it to Teams, but I think that's fine.
Well, it opened to, hey, do you want to download Teams? And I already have Teams on the machine, so that's what I got.
Either you can do either or. I mean, you can go right to the internet version, and it works pretty much just the same.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right. I'm seeing that. Join now. Connecting. So that'll be easier, right, for you to keep up
to associate you with if your name pops up.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm gonna go ahead and mute all right now, but if Jason, you might need to just unmute your phone once I hit mute.
Gotcha.
And Jason's gonna do the introduction, so everybody knows. We're going to get started in a minute. We're just going to give another minute. People are still just coming in right now. So if y'all just hold on just another minute. Apparently everybody got the registration link this time, I think. We're up to 100 folks so far, so. We'll get started in just 1 minute. All right, Jason, if you want to go ahead and get started with the introductions, we still might have a few join us in the meantime, but if you want to go ahead and get started.
Thanks, Patty. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for this week's NCLUG Tech Talk series. We're wanting to keep our members updated on the latest news and technology, so NCLUG has created weekly tech talks about various industry topics to keep you engaged. This week's tech talk will be using survey data to create existing terrain in ORD, presented by Tim Wright of Bentley. During this session, we will import raw survey data, correct errors, and refine the data in order to generate break lines, spot shots, and planimetric line work. Ultimately, we will deliver a comprehensive, well-defined existing ground terrain, as well as a survey map including line work, contours, and annotation. First, we do have a few housekeeping notes. This will be a presentation, so all attendees will be muted. Save questions till the end of the presentation, then you can unmute yourself to ask a question. Please note that the session will be recorded and posted to the nclug.com website within a few days. NCLUG is offering PDH credits to those who have registered for this event. If you were forwarded the meeting link, you will need to make sure you are registered on the NCLUG website. We will keep the event active until 3 p.m. today to give you time to register. After this session, NCLUG will send out PDH receipts to those who attended the live meeting. Credit will not be given to those who view the recorded presentation afterwards. Also, stay until the end of the presentation, as we will be holding a drawing for a $50 gift card to Amazon for one lucky NCLUG member. You must be online to win. Now we will hand the presentation over to Tim Wright of Bentley. Thanks, Tim.
Well, thank you for the introduction and welcome, everyone. I hope you're having a pretty good afternoon. start things off, we have a vertical handshake, right? So
Sorry, I didn't mean to mute him.
all right, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, Tim. Sorry.
All right, good deal. Okay, so as I was saying, we usually start things off with a handshake, but obviously we can't do that anymore. So just real quick, I've been with Bentley for 5 years. Before that, I was 18 and a half years with the Illinois DOT. So I haven't forgotten what it's been like to be an end user there. So let's jump right into it. I'm not going to kill or bore you to death with the PowerPoint, you know, death by slides. I like to get into the software and do a live demo. This is not pre-recorded. This is on the fly, and we're going to do things live here. So what I'm going to do is just start off with, we're going to do 2 data sets here today. So in the first one, I'm going to use the Quick Start for Survey. This is one of our Bentley Learn courses. And for the second data set, we'll get into a little more detail on a couple of different things, show you some other options, and that's the importing and reviewing survey data. So both of those courses are really good, and I suggest you take them. There is also one for terrain creation. That's also a really good one, and right away if that's your thing. So with that, whenever I create a new file, there's things that I always stress to people. There's 3 things, right? Location, okay, and then seed file, okay? Especially with survey data or terrain models, these are the 2 exceptions to our standard 2D world that we typically design in. With survey data or terrain models, they must reside in a 3D file. So please don't forget that. It'll create that 3D model in the background if you try to pull in survey data into a 2D file, and it turns into a quagmire. So always make sure to go ahead and create this in a 3D file here. So I'm just going to give it a quick name, and we'll just say demo maybe. How about that for today? So as that loads up, we'll talk about a little of the things that we're going to cover. Like we said, we're going to take some data. We're going to show you a couple of different ways to edit that data. Now, a lot of this is going to be my personal preference on how we work. I'll try to show you a couple of different ways that you can create do the same edits through different methods. So basically, just a blank DG in here, you know, from the seed file. Now let's talk just a quick second about the environment that I'm in. You'll see I've got the survey workflow open here. Okay, I suggest that, first of all, obviously a lot of our tools for survey are going to be under that. The next thing is you'll notice that on the Home tab and on the Field Book tab and on the Analyze tab, we have these 2 dialogues that show up. So if you think about our tabs here, it's kind of the workflow as you go through a project, right? You start at your home, you do a field book, you analyze that, maybe edit that data, you build your terrain model, you might throw some geometry, some existing alignments or right away, and then you kick that out the door, right? So it kind of progresses as you work through a project. And on the first 3 tabs are these same 2 icons, right? The Explorer and Details. And there's a reason for that. The Explorer really is the survey interface. So the designers use the Explorer as kind of a backdoor into the design data. You can help to diagnose things, or if you like to edit elements that way, you can certainly do that. But for surveyors, this is our little world here. This is where we play, and this is our playground, right? So I always like to have this up. I don't like to put the little push pin in. If you push the push pin in, it turns into a little tab. I really don't like that for the survey interface, and I'll show you why later. Another good thing to have up is the big properties dialog, and I do use the push pin for that. That's kind of nice, and we'll talk about why I have the properties stuck to the wall there. But so let's go ahead and show you what a typical workflow is when everything is set up and you're working by the standards here. So let me go ahead and open up a file here. Let me come here. Give me just a second. Things are getting kind of flaky. Let me open that back up. There we go. All right, so what I've done here is just opened up a Windows File Explorer, and I'm just going to navigate over to that directory that I created where my data resides. Okay, so again, this is from our quick start. And there's just a single data file in here, but it's an RW5 file. And we'll talk about the different formats when we get into our next data set. But I just kind of want to show you what it looks like when everything goes according to plan, right? Now you'll see I have just a survey data here. And if I click that little branch open, you can see I have categories. And one of that is field books. And one of the questions we always get, well, what is a field book? How do I use it? You know, what's the right way to do it? And to be honest with you, you can use it pretty much any way, the way that you want to organize your data. Typically what I like to see, and again, this is personal preference, I like to see a single field book for the entire project. And we'll see why in the next data set that you can still manage individual data collections. But if you don't like that operation, you can certainly have an individual field book for each collection set of data that you have. So this is actually the category for field books. There aren't any field books right now currently in this file. And the way we can create a field book, there's a couple of different ways. Like I said, there's going to be 3 or 4 different ways to do everything. You know, it's on your personal preference how to do that. I can come up here to the field book and I can say, give me a new field book. I can right click on that category there and that will create a new field book. Or when I do my drag and drop process, if there isn't already a field book in this DGN file, it will automatically create that for me. So before I do that, let me just show you something really quick here. So under the Open Road Standards tab in my file here, you'll see the survey settings. And right now there's not the little triangle off to the side there. So there aren't any survey settings in this file currently. Okay, so just hold on to that for a second. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up my data file here, right? And I'm going to drag it, and I'm literally going to just drop it right on that category of field books. Okay, now again, this is when you're doing everything by the standards, right? And you'll see a little green bar down there, it flashed, right? And now I've got a little triangle here, and there's my field book. So it automatically created a place to put that data. Okay, so let's go back to the Open Road Standards just real quick, and I'm going to show you now. Let me update that. Now we have a survey settings, and there you see that. So once you create a field book, this file kind of becomes a survey file. Okay, before that, those survey settings were not in this file, and that came from our DGN lib. Okay, so out there on our server somewhere, somebody's taken the time to set up all our configuration and give us a nice setup. Now, one of the first things that I want to talk about is we've got our data in here, so I'm just going to fit view, and you can see we've got a nice little data set. It's not, honestly, this is a made up data set, so there aren't a lot of ground shots out here. It's not a perfect data set, but it's nice and quick, and we use it for training. Okay, so just bear that in mind. We'll look at a real data set in a little later here. One of the first things I want to talk about, though, are these little boxes with these check marks, because this can get you into a little bit of trouble. As you're clicking these little triangles to like expand the different sections, it's kind of easy to drift your mouse a little over and like click on that little arrow, and there or that checkbox, and you'll see what happens then. Everything disappears, right? So it's really cool that you can turn things off by like a point code or point list, right? If you want to turn like all your chains off or all your linear features off, and then just see, you know, like the pavement points. That's really awesome, right? Because you can do that. But just don't forget that you've got everything turned off. I catch myself a lot of times like, where is my right of way or where's my sidewalks? And, you know, and at some point in time, I've inadvertently turned those off. So that's the first thing I want you to make you aware of, is that these little check marks here turn things on and off, because that will get you confused. And the next is under this Analyze tab, we have something unique for survey. Okay, so design has a bunch of tools that are kind of unique to design, like the cross-section viewer and things like that. Well, survey has some tricks up its sleeve too. After we've processed this data, we can use these decorations. Now, decorations are a personal type preference here. So now that I zoom in, you can see that I've got my point names, and I can turn on field codes and elevations and descriptions and even icons. Now, what icons do, you'll see we actually have a few data problems with our data here. Let me turn those others off real quick so you can see that. So the software realizes that there are some processing issues with some of these elements, right? And we'll talk about each one of these in turn, right? But that's a nice one. So the bad thing about decorations, and the thing that I kind of keep harping on them, is that there is no like toggle, like the background doesn't, you know, turn blue or orange like some of the icons do. That's kind of obnoxious, right? It is kind of hard to tell sometimes whether you've got things turned on and off, and you just kind of have to come in here and click on those. If you don't like my colors or the location or the size of that text, that's a simple matter to just go back into your user preferences here. I'm just going to show this real quick, not really get into the editing. But under View Options Civil is Survey Decorators. There's a category. So if you want to get in there and play with those colors or sizes, feel free to do that. It's a user preference, right? So it's not going to affect anybody else or the drawing, right? This is a user preference. So again, this is just a tool. It's not labeling, okay? These are not static text elements. I do believe they'll plot, though. I do think they'll print because it's usually WYSIWYG, right? What you see is what you get. All right, just for sake of clarity, I'm going to turn all those off. I will leave the icons on, okay? So that's the interface in a nutshell. Again, go ahead and open up the Explorer, get it docked off to the side wherever you want, you know, but you need to leave it open because this is our playground. This is our environment. And don't forget about decorations. So you can come out here and toggle point names on and off. So let's talk about what we got here. We've got a file that processed in. Like I said, this was all done by standards, so the software knew how to handle this data. In the next set, we're not going to be so lucky, so we'll have to jump through another hoop or two to get that to work. But let's talk about editing here. The first thing we'll see is this green dashed outline, and that's our terrain model, all right? And that's the star of the show today, right? If you're not familiar with the way terrain models work in Open Roads technology, it is an element that's going to contain all the information that we know about that existing ground. Okay, now that could come from LiDAR data. It could come from hard survey shots like we see here. There are a lot of different sources where you can build this terrain model element. And it can take on different facades or different displays based on a feature definition. Now, I always tell people when you're in the survey file or when you're in the terrain model file, ignore these two categories. All right, these are the element. What is it? There's a special, I forget what it is, but basically the break lines, points, voids, things like that. These are elements that are inside the actual element, that terrain model element. So actual physical things. And then things like contours and triangles and flow arrows, those are all built on the fly. So these are calculated features. These are component features, I think. I don't remember. But I always tell people to really just ignore this, okay? This is more when we reference that terrain model in, you can turn things on and off. If I turn things on and off here and something changes with that terrain model, as soon as I do that, it's going to go back to the feature definition, okay? So to kind of clear up that headache, I always tell people, come down here to the feature definition. Right now, you'll see we're set to existing boundary. I'm just going to click the down arrow, and I'm just going to say, you know what, show me triangles instead. And after a second, that file processes, and you can see the triangles there, okay? Now, when I say processes, it's not like we recreated this element, right? The terrain element is what it is. It's just changing what features are displayed. And again, it's much better to do this via the feature definition when you're in the file than to toggle these on and off. I know it's right there. It's like, why can't I click on it? But trust me, as soon as you make an edit, it will go back to the feature definition, and you'll just find yourself turning those on and off constantly. So it is an option when you're surveying, or it's one of our configuration setups that we import or we create the terrain model from the survey data as it's being processed, okay? You don't have to do that. This could simply be all the survey elements without the terrain model. But let me show you why I like that, why I like to see the terrain model as I'm editing the data, because you can find a lot of errors sometimes just by looking at contours or triangles. And if we look at our data here, right here, smack in the middle, we've got an element with a little icon on it, right? Remember, that's the icon from our disc decorators. It's got a little flag on it. Now, one of the nice things, again, about OpenRoads technology, I haven't selected that element. If I just hover over it, it's going to give me a lot of information about it. You can see I know the name of that element. I know its feature code. I know what zone it's in, you know, etc. It also, up there at the top, says linear feature is a terrain model attribute void, right? But it must be a closed shape and cannot intersect itself. Okay, so we've got a problem, and the software says, hey, you told me buildings were voids, but I can't make a void out of an open element. Okay, so how do we fix that? So there's a couple ways. Let me show you the graphical way. Okay, so all I'm going to do, I've got my element selection tool selected here. I'm just going to left click on that chain. And when I do that, you'll see these little bits of text pop up. And these are handles. Okay, and elements now, there's no like GPK. I don't know if you're inroads or the other Geopack state, but we had a GPK file and that like ruled everything, right? That's where all the data lived. And that's no longer the case. Now all the data, the engineering data or the survey data is on these elements themselves or stored within them. You can tell that just by hovering over it, right? This thing knows a lot about itself. These are the linking codes for the points. Now, if you're not familiar with linking codes, they're a code that's added to like the shot out in the field that says, hey, I'm going to start a line here, and then I'm not going to change that line till I get to the end. Well, that's the problem, because we went off and we started picking up another house, right? And we never did close this house. So what I need to do is go to that last point that we picked and change its linking code. Now, the nice thing about these handles is I can simply left click on it and a little dialog pops up there, and I can come in here and say, you know what, you were really supposed to be a close. Now, we'll talk about close shape in the next data set, but I'm going to say close. And what that's going to do then is it's going to take that final point and just take it right back to the start. But what I want you to notice is what happens to that terrain model, right? You can see our terrain model out here. So I'm just going to change that linking code, and instantly that terrain model updated. Okay, so if you haven't seen this before, you're probably, you know, your mind's blown up, right? Because now no longer do you have to say, well, is my, you know, my DTM up to date, or my triangle file, or however you handle that. Because as I edit this data, it's rebuilding that terrain model. So things have changed, right? In those elements that go together to create that terrain model, and the terrain model automatically updates the triangle. The other handle that we have available on linear features is this determined by feature definition. And if I hover over that, you can see that's actually the terrain model attribute. So right now, whether or not this house is part of my terrain model is determined by its feature definition. Okay. If you're not familiar with feature definitions, they're really the wave of the future and how OpenRoads Designer works. So under our standards here, we have, I can show you that real quick. We've got just tons of feature definitions, right? And under survey, this goes pretty deep. So I'll just pick one. How about landscaping? Well, there's only one under landscaping, tree, right? So for our trees here, there is a feature definition. So there's a one-to-one relationship between the code out in the field and our feature definitions. And what the feature definition does then is it determines the cell, how it's placed, you know, what scale it's at, things of that nature, even how it's annotated. And another attribute is whether it's part of the terrain model. So right now, this house is relying on that feature definition to determine whether it's part of the terrain model or not. But I can always come in here and say, you know what, even though you're supposed to be a void, nah, don't include. And you'll see it automatically drops it right out of there. Okay, that handle just needed to update. Okay, if I wanted to change that back, it's an easy matter to do. Okay, and again, the terrain model updates almost instantaneously. So that's a quick edit, right? There's other ways to edit too. So as I come in here, I've got a culvert right here. And I happen to know that this point here, you'll look at its elevation at 142.71. If I look at the other point over here, it's also at 142.71. All right. Now that might cause a problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select it. And then I'm going to go over here to my properties tab. And you'll see why I kind of like that as a tab, right? Because now when I hover over it, it pops it up and there's my, my points. Now, anything in these fields that's black or dark, you can edit. So you'll notice there's my elevation field right there. So all I need to do then is come in if I want to make a change to that elevation, and I don't have to make a big change here. I'm just going to give it something to so both of these slopes aren't the same, right? So we actually have a little bit of slope to our culvert. That was just an error in our processing. Okay. So another thing that we can see here is we've got a line here, a linear feature that's white. Let me do this real quick. I'm just going to turn off my triangles. And again, the way I'm doing that is just selecting it, going to the properties, and changing the feature definition. It really takes seconds to do that. Okay. So there it's, now we're back to just seeing that perimeter or boundary element. So you'll see that there's a bunch of those icons all over there. And if I hover over it, it says EOGVL is not found in feature definitions. So what does that mean? Well, that means that we processed those elements and we couldn't find that feature code. And so we just gave it a default. Now, if we hover over to the next one, you see we just fat fingered it out in the field, right? It's EOGRVL. Okay, whereas this one is just EOGVL. So you might be tempted to just go ahead and grab that chain, right, and change its properties, because you can look at that and you can change its field code. But I caution you against that, right? I always tell my people, or the people that have taken my training, be a good physician, right? Because if you think about it, this linear feature has been created by those points. Okay, it's not like a separate entity. There's actually a relationship between these points and that linear feature. And let me show you that. If I open up the points feature now, the category, you can see the different point codes or feature codes that have been entered in the field, right? So this is our list of points. So we have some trees, we have some, some pavement, we have, here's our EOGVL and our EO gravel, right? So you see the difference there, and this one's red. That's a hint to you that, hey, something's wrong with it. I don't understand what to do with these. Now, I said that these two icons were important. I'm going to bring up the next one now. This is the details dialog. And I always like to have this one docked. Now, ironically, a lot of times surveyors are working on a single laptop screen, and we've got the biggest dialogues, it seems. So it's kind of an oxymoron, right? But it is what it is. So you have to deal with it. If you do have the benefit of two monitors, by all means, grab this survey details, yank it over to the other side, and expand it maybe half the screen. Because, like I said, these two work in tandem. As I come over to the Explorer here, you'll see it's kind of shrunken up a little bit, but I can still scroll up and down through my list. As I select a category of points, like my EO gravel here, it populates down in the survey details. And if you'll remember, I said, if a field is dark or black, you can edit it. And that's true here. So I could come in here and I could edit every single one of these attributes here that's dark and make those changes. But if you're probably thinking to yourself, well, yeah, I want to click through like 30,000 points, right, to make that same change. Well, you don't have to. You'll see we've got columns or rows over here where I can select those points, and it will highlight that point. It gives me a little identifier there, a little halo, purple halo there, and you can identify those points, right? So I can select each point in turn by clicking on its row here. Now, at the top of that column is this blank little square. Now, you may think that that doesn't do anything, but just like this file up here isn't really a tab, you know, it goes, takes us out to the back page. This little square here is actually a select all. So I can filter my points, the points that I want to select here based on my Explorer, right? I select the category or the point feature definition that I want to grab, and then I can bring it into survey details and do bulk editing. So now I'm going to select that little select all button there. And now I can simply come into those points and right click on any one of these fields here on the rows and say, I'm going to edit the selected items. And what am I going to edit? I'm going to edit that field code, right? So now it's going to be EOGRVL, okay? Now, unfortunately, this is, I'll cover up my little Bentley logo here. This is another thing that kind of drives me a little crazy. You have to click the little green arrow, right? Just hitting enter doesn't do you any good, right? So you got to hit the little green arrow. You'll see that a lot in survey. As soon as I did that, as soon as I clicked that green arrow, look what happened to that line, right? Because I changed the points, the underlying problem, it fixed the line as well. So again, be a good physician, right? Don't treat the symptom, treat the disease, and the symptom will go away. Okay, that works for triangles too, right? We had troubles with our triangles with this house. We didn't touch triangles, okay? We changed the house and that fixed everything. We've got one other edit that I want to talk about real quick. So this is leaving everything as what we call a linear feature. Okay, so if I select just a random linear feature here and I go to the manage a point list, this is how we used to edit survey chains, right? At least in Geopack. You had a list of points and they were in order and you could modify those orders. You could pull points in and out. But you'll notice that I don't have that option now, right? This is all blank or redded or has a red highlight here, and I can't make any changes other than the linking codes. And that's because this is a linear feature, and linear features are created from the software by looking at those point attributes and the order that they were shot in the field. And that's what got us into trouble over here. So we come over to this element up here, and you see they shot this point, then they jumped up here, shot that point, and then came down, shot it over here, and then closed the shape. So you can see, you know, they have their linking codes correct, but they shot the order of the points kind of backwards, right? Now, if I select that element and open up its point list, again, you'll see I can't change the order of those points, right? I can't fix this, okay? But don't be dismayed, because all we need to do is take this linear feature and drop it down to a pointless feature, okay? And the way we do that is we select the element, hover over the toolbar there, and you'll notice this tool, convert to a pointless linear feature, okay? Now, I caution you a little bit. You'll notice that this icon looks like a little squiggly line with 3 dots on it, right? I'm going to go ahead and select it now, okay? So no fanfare, no fireworks, no explosions. It just did its thing. Well, it's real easy for me to think that nothing happened, right? So I'm going to come back and I'm going to do it again. But now look at this icon. It's just a little squiggly line without any dots, okay? And this is where you could get yourself into trouble. Because if I click that same icon again, okay, or the icon without the dots now, it turns into a dumb graphic. So it's still pretty smart at this point. Now it is just based on a point list feature. So let me open up its point list and let you see that. So now you can see that point list opens up. I don't have the red background anymore, and I've got a bunch of new tools up here. You can see I can transpose it, right, if it's shot in the wrong direction. I can insert or replace points. I have all sorts of crazy tools at my disposal. And one of them is I can select this point here, and you'll see it's highlighting, and I say I really need this point to go in front of 147. That's 147 there. So all I'm going to do is say use these little up arrows here and bump it up. And as soon as I do that, you'll notice the purple lines appear kind of showing me a preview, right? So nothing has happened yet. I haven't modified my data until I click the good old accept button here. So let me go ahead and accept that, and there you'll see that that change is made. All right. So a couple of different ways to edit your data. Like I said, a lot of times you can do it graphically. You may go over to the properties of the element. You can change everything there. Or you may have to drop a linear feature down to a pointless feature. That's another option. Okay. Now, you'll remember that I said we can create the terrain model as we go. And I like that, right? Because you can see the effects of your edit immediately. But you don't have to. So let me go ahead and I'm just going to delete this terrain model, right? It's just an element. So I'm going to go ahead and delete it and show you how you can recreate that. So as I come in here, I'm going to go to that field book 1 and I'm going to right click and say create my terrain model. And it's literally that simple. And there you can see that terrain model pop up. Okay. Now, there's a couple more things that I might want to do to this terrain model. Looking at the time here, we're not critical yet, but I do want to show you a couple of things. So we'll talk about edge triangles. So let me bring this back to triangles real quick, just so we can see that. Not the best terrain model. There's in the creating and editing terrain models, there's a real good chapter on this. So I suggest you explore that a little further, but let me show you this real quick. So we run into a little problem with this dynamic terrain model, okay? And that's when we come to like these edge triangles, because you can see here, we don't have any real points out in this area here. Our last real point is this driveway chain, right? So typically that should be the edge of our terrain model, right? These extra triangles here really don't belong here. So there's a few steps that we have to take to do this. Now, I highly suggest you wait till you're done collecting all your data, right? You're getting ready to pass this off, then you correct these edge triangles. Until then, just ignore them, just live with them, okay? So I'm going to select that terrain model. I'm going to bump my mouse to get the options here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come out and let me think, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to my terrain tools here. And I am going to edit the model here. Now, before I do that, I have to turn off the dynamics of it. And now that I think about it, I wonder if I change that process. So let me see here. I'm going to go ahead and say edit that model. And I'm going to select my terrain model. Isn't it letting me edit that? That's kind of all right. A little hiccup there. Let's move on. I think I might have confused it there when I deleted that terrain model. Let me select that guy again and see if I can bring him back. Let's go to properties. All right, so that's from my existing. That all looks good. Match edge length, major contours. All right, so I think we should be good here. All right, so let's go to our real data set. Oh, one more thing before we go into this. We'll do triangles in the other one. One more thing before we leave. I'm just going to bring this back to our boundary. One thing I do want to show you real quick is annotation. So annotation now is driven by the feature definitions. So under our drawing production tab, I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to say annotate the entire model. Okay, so I'm just going to select that. I'm going to do all the drawing models. No, because I have just this one here. So let me left click it. After a second, it's going to process. And you'll see just how powerful this is. So here we've got a building. You can see we've got our trees are labeled, even like this culvert here. So it figured out this was a field note, right? When we look at that, we can see we have a field book, and maybe it's on that. Oh, no, attribute pair. There's our attribute pair, about the 4th or 5th line down. You can see size 12-inch type CMP. All right, so it captured that right there. the software actually figured out what that slope is based on those points. That's why I kind of had to come back here and fix this elevation, because when we, in our data set, these 2 points have the same elevation, and it kind of confuses the software a little bit. But you can see that it grabbed the length. So the length is actually the length from those 2 points. So again, the software is pretty intelligent as far as labeling goes. So things like your control points can be nicely labeled. And of course, this is all user defined, right? Or by your environment. So you can decide what gets displayed here, how it gets displayed, and all that good stuff. So I wanted to show you that. But before we run out of time, I want to get to the other data set. So to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and make a brand new file here. And I'm going to scooch out of this data set, and I'm going to go for the importing and reviewing survey data. Okay, so I'm just going to come in here and say, create a new file here. And again, just a blank file. So now what we're going to talk about is the geographical coordinate system. Okay, like I said, that last data set was kind of made up, so it didn't have a real geographic coordinate system. Now, another little annoying thing is that there's no geographic coordinate system on the survey toolbar. Okay, I've put in a ticket on that. I've kind of yelled at people. Nobody has fixed it yet. Hopefully in the some of the later releases, we'll see this dialog move over to the survey workflow. If you're a surveyor, I don't have to preach to you about geographic coordinate systems and how important they are. You realize that. And for layman's, this is basically the coordinate value that we give that little brass pin that's put in concrete, right? Our benchmarks. So the Earth moves, right? Plate tectonics, we get better graphical models of the Earth's surface. So these points, or the definitions of those points, actually changes over time. And each one of those is given a geographic coordinate system. So without a geographic coordinate system, really the software has no clue as to where this point is in the world. So these are pretty important. So I'm going to click on the little from library here. And I've already got the one I want to use in my favorites, but let me show you real quick how I got to that. So I'm just going to type in.
I lost your video.
Oh, we lost video.
I don't see anything either.
All right, let me try that again. Where'd you lose it at? Right here or a few minutes ago?
I lost it when you got back out to opening a new drawing.
All right, I didn't quite hear that. Since I started the new file, or?
Yes, and switched files.
Okay, all right, so we're good now? You can see everything?
Yes.
Okay, so all I did, again, was go out to a new file. I opened up the geographic coordinate system here under drawing, and I'm going to select it. Okay, so from library here, I'm just going to search text, and I'm going to do Alabama 83/2011. Okay. Now, I caution you, when you first enter a search field in here, if it's on this any word, it's going to find everything, right? So I like to put it on all words. It just limits your, because if I had put in like NAD 83 here, I would have found, 2,000 different coordinate systems. So I like to use all and just find now. And you'll see it doesn't take too long to search through those to get the correct one. If you don't know the correct geographic coordinate system to use, then get with your project lead or the surveyor who shot the points, because they'll be able to tell you. And the one we want is Alabama 83/2011 Western Foot. So I'm going to go ahead and say, okay. Now, if I wanted to, I could add that to my favorites, right? And what that does then is under your library tab here, up at the top, you'll see I've already got it listed. Okay. So it's just in your state, you probably have, I don't know, 6 to 8 probably at the most that you use, and, go ahead and click OK. In Illinois, we had 2 and a couple of different flavors, like, NAD 83 or the Harn update, things of that nature. So that's all I've done. Now, in a blank file, I can change this all day long and it doesn't do anything, right? It's just a placeholder to let the software know what coordinate system this lies in, okay? Now, if we had data in the file and I change this, it's going to ask me a very important question. It's going to ask me whether or not I just want to change that label or whether I want to reprocess that data or transform that data, basically. So be very aware of that, and don't just click on that dialog and ignore it, because that's a big deal. All right, so just keep that in mind. All right, so now we're going to do the same process that we did before, where we pulled in that data, but this time we're not so lucky. Maybe we got something from a municipality, or maybe one of our survey chiefs has gone rogue. He's not following the standards, right? But if I come out here and I open up my survey tab again, you can see I've got no field books at this point. And I go ahead and I try to drag my ASCII file over and drop it on my field book. I get an error. Of course, it's on my other screen. And it says, hey, I don't know what to do with this, this formatted file. Okay, now I'm not going to go into too much detail on this, but under the survey standards, we have a thing called, what is it called? Now I'm going to have to go there to remember what it's called. I'm drawing a blank. Let me go to properties real quick. Data file parsing, that's it. Okay, so under this data file parsing, basically what you do is you say, if the file that I'm bringing in has this extension, this .asc extension, process it this way. But we don't have one defined for an ASC, okay? So it doesn't know what to do with the file. Now, the flip side to that is if I have 5 different ways to process an ASC file, then it's going to pop up another dialog, and every time I process a file here, it's going to ask me, which one of those 5 different ways do I want to process it? So ideally, you have a file extension as a standard, and that file extension, the way that data is formatted, is consistent across the board, okay? Now, let me show you what to do if it's not, right? So we can't drag and drop right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up to the field book here, and I'm going to say import using the text wizard, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and use the text wizard here, and I'm going to go out to that ASCII directory, and I'm just going to pick the first one here. So I'm going to pick the first file, and this dialog pops up, and it basically allows us to define how that data is pulled in. And you can see it is a uniform data set. That looks pretty good, right? The type, it's not delimited. There's no commas, there's no space. What we have here is a fixed width. So you see those columns are vertical there. So that's kind of a clue that we're dealing with a fixed width file. The other option that we can do here is a start row. So if your data sets have 2 or 3 lines of, the project number or the survey crew or whatever, you can blank those out and say, well, I want to start actually processing on row 3 or 4. Okay. Now, again, not a lot happens here. The software is waiting for you to come up here and click the next button. So I click the next button, and now I'm actually going to define those columns. So all I need to do is come down and left click out here to kind of put a placeholder at the end of those columns. Okay. Once that's, I got one more under elevation. All right. Once that's done, once I've defined that, I go to next. Now you can see it's processed that data correctly. Now, if I don't have those correct, you'll see maybe I forgot to put one in and I click next. Your fields aren't going to be processed correctly. So it's a simple matter to go back and forth until those fields look good. So now I just need to click on these headers, and I'm going to call this is the point name, northern easting elevation, right? And elevation, and finally the codes. Okay. Once I'm done, I can go ahead and finish. And it says, hey, do you want to create a TIW file? And what a TIW file is, a text import wizard file. And it's usually a good thing, especially if you're the one in charge of setting up all these standards, right? It's a quick way to use this tool to go ahead and create a TIW file. So I'm going to say yes, because that's pretty cool. Now it's going to dump it where all my TIW files are kept. Now this may be a problem, right? Because if this is off on a server, you may not have rights to that. So let me just push this over to our directory here. Let's see, try to remember where I put those files. Bentley training. Just drill down through that network real quick. And I'm going to dump it here. You'll see I already have one called Tim, so I'm just going to overwrite that one real quick. And then another important, save the TIW format in the import settings. Well, that's pretty cool. Go ahead and do that for me. So I'm going to click yes here. You'll see it's going to process in the bottom right-hand corner. I'm going to do a fit view, and now that pulls in. Now, what did it mean when it said I'm going to add it to the import? If I go back to those survey settings real quick, and again, I'm just going to show you real quick here. My little 3-dot box. If I look at this filter, this is where you define the file extension. You'll see all the way down here at the bottom, I've got one called Tim's. It's an ASCII extension, and it does, this is the formatting file, right? That text import wizard file. So you can see it added all that information for me. So what's awesome about that is I can go back down to my survey tab now. I can go back to my, get off of there. There we go. Go back to my survey tab, come down to my field book, right? There you can see I have one data file so far, but I can go back to my Windows Explorer. I can grab the rest of those 3 through 18 here, and I can drag and drop them now. Now I'm going to put them in the same field book, right? So I put it under field book 1, left click, or take my finger off the left click, and it's going to process that survey data. You'll see it's going through the different files there. Remember if we had duplicate names on this or not. We may run into that. It may be what it's waiting for. Let me see here. Nope. Okay, that's the other data set. And there you go. So it processed. Now, if you remember at the beginning, we talked about, how you have your field book here. And you can see that even though I have a single field book, the software keeps track of all the different field books files that I brought in, right? All the different collection sets. So that's pretty awesome. So, if you have a rod height bust on something, I can turn off my field book here, and I can come down and say, this was the data collection that's our problem. So I'm just going to deal with these points here. Okay, so you can do that. Turn those back on. Like I said, these little check marks are a blessing and a curse, right? They can get you confused. All right, so now let's talk more about getting that final terrain model pushed out, right? So we saw some ways to edit terrain models. I'm going to show you another way, or a process that I kind of like. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to set my terrain model to triangles, right? I kind of like triangles. You can do contours too. And I think in this data set, yes, okay. If you know anything about contours, that's a problem, right? You can see that point there has issues. We've got some others, but I want to go back to triangles real quick because I just want to show you something. Hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for questions. So now let's talk about rotating your view. Again, we're in a 3D file, and this confuses a lot of people. If I come up here to the rotate view icon, I click and I hold for a second, and the drop-down list appears. Okay, I can pick a couple of presets like an isometric. That's pretty nice, right? Or I can pick, the top view. A lot of people like to work off of that. But we also have rotate view, and this is what gets people in trouble. If I just pick this and rotate it, This is pretty good, actually. I got lucky. But if you think about holding an apple right in front of your face and just rotating your wrist, right? You can rotate your wrist all day long. It won't get out of your field of view. But if you hold it at arm's length and rotate it your shoulder, pretty soon you're not going to see that apple anymore. That's what this little cross is your rotation point. So I like to pick that up and just let AccuSnap find a point on your model or your terrain model there. And then now that 4-pointed compass, I can pick that view up and rotate it around that point. Okay. Now, what's nice about this is that I can come in here and already I can see there's my little point, right, that we saw with contours. You can see that little sinkhole. So that's a problem, right? So if I select that point there, for whatever reason, that guy should probably not be in my terrain model. So I'm going to select him. I'm going to go over here to properties, and there's my terrain model attribute. I can just pick the properties and say, you know what? Don't be in the terrain model anymore. There, it's fixed, right? I'm going to go ahead and rotate this again, and you can see another problem, right? Now we've got a break line here. It looks like a culvert or something, creating a weird little crevice here in our terrain model. Now, to see this a little better, something that I like to do is go from wireframe here to one of the other methods. Illustration, ignore lighting, that's a pretty good one. And you have now more of like a solid surface that you can look at. And you can see where the problem is. Basically, that culvert has cut a swath through our terrain model. Okay, so again, an easy fix, right? I come up here and I select my linear feature there. I can go to its properties. I can actually go from the pop-up menu there, right? Go to properties. Again, terrain model attribute, that's wrong. I just say, you know what, don't include that. And my terrain model is fixed. Okay. Now, let's pretend that we've got our terrain model all cleaned up here and ready to go. We talked about those edge triangles a little bit. Let me find a good place to do that. Let's edit. Let me get back to a wireframe mode because it's a little easier to see what I'm doing there. Okay. So like these triangles right here, probably not good triangles, right? So just real quick, before we run out of time here, I'm going to select that terrain model. And I am going to, why aren't I getting that handle? Let me think here. I'm going to edit my terrain model. Use command. All right, something's broke here. I don't know if it's my software or what, but I should be able to come up here and edit that terrain model. I don't know why it's not letting me do that. All right, well, let's try one more thing because I need to show you this anyway. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a lot of times, like I said, I like to have the terrain model in the survey file as we're editing it. But sometimes that's not ideal, right? Sometimes you don't want this terrain model to be a part of your, your display or whatever you pass on to the designers. So there's a couple of ways that you can do that. One of the ways is just real quick, we can create a new file. So before we do that, though, let me select my terrain model, and you can see we've got export options here. And so I'm just going to drop this out to a 10 model or a DTM. It really doesn't matter which, because they're all going to be pretty much the same here. And you'll see I've already got a file called there because I was playing around this morning. I'm just going to drop it out to that. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to create a new file. And again, it has a terrain model, so it's got to be a 3D file. I'm just going to call that terrain. And just for fun, I can go ahead and show you that geographic coordinate system. So as we go into our drawing here, look at our geographic coordinate system. It is the Georgia one, or North Carolina, excuse me. Let's go back to survey, and we're going to create that terrain model, and we're just going to use that DTM file. Right now, this does create a not really a static file, because I'll show you something here real quick. So I'm going to import that. And again, this is one of those cases where it just sits there and doesn't do anything, right? So there's our terrain model. Next thing I'm going to do is just put that onto an isometric, and I'm going to bring you to the front of this. And you can see now we've got nice contours. Everything looks pretty good. But wouldn't it be nice if we went out there and did some more surveying or something, changed some of the terrain model attributes, and this file was easy to update? Well, this is why I like this way to do it, because I can go back to my files here, go back to that original survey file. I'll show you another quick update real quick that's pretty cool. Before I know we're almost out of time here, so give me just a second here. So I'm going to come under my survey data real quick. All right, I'm going to go under those field books, and I'm going to go all point features. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick my edge of pavement here. I'm going to open up my details, right? I'm going to select all those points, all my edge of pavement points. I'm going to right click here, and I'm going to edit their elevation, and I'm going to do some math, right? So this is pretty awesome. So I'm going to say minus 10 foot, just to give us a really drastic change here. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. It's going to process that model. Okay. Now, I still need to update that DTM file, right? So I'm going to select that then and say export it again. I'm going to update my DTM model, save it. Now, when I go back out to my terrain model, my DGN that has just the terrain model in it, you'll see nothing's changed, right? Well, the terrain model hasn't known that anything's changed, so we just go up here and say update from source, select the file. You'll see it kept that entire path, and there's my changes. You'll see that terrain model update. So again, this is only kind of if you want to separate that terrain model from the rest of the survey data. If you're okay with living, both of those living in the same file, that's probably the best option, but it's certainly another course of action. So we're out of time. I'm going to go ahead and pass this back and I guess open it up for questions. I'll be happy to sit around for a few more minutes and talk about stuff if you need to.
Thanks, Tim. We hope everybody picked up a little bit something from this today. If you have any questions for Tim, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away. Real quick though, reminder, we will be sending out PDH credit receipts to attendees. If you do not receive a credit receipt, please contact us at NCLUG at events@nclug.com. If you use the forwarding link, you must go to the nclug.com website and register to get credit. Join NCLUG for next week's Tech Talk on July 29th at noon for bringing data into Open Road Designer. You'll get an email invite soon. NCLUG will try to host Tech Talk events weekly. So if you have a topic you would like to be covered, please email us at events@nclug.com. Be sure to tell others to become NCLUG members so they can get invites for upcoming events. Membership is free. And at the end, we will go ahead and actually, Patty, do we have the
Winner
name
of
of
the
the
gift
person?
card?
Yes.
Yeah, is John Manning.
All right, John, congratulations. I guess you can contact us afterwards on how to receive that.
Yeah, we'll send him an email. Yeah.
Yep. Thanks for joining us today. And if you guys have questions, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask Tim anything you need. Thank you.
I have a question. This is Pam Petrucci. My question is, your linking codes, when you talked, I saw you had a start and a none, but where's that located and what do you have to use?
Sure. So again, that's something that's going to be a standard for your environment. Okay, so under the survey standards here, going to open up the properties, and I'm just going to pop this out because it's a little easier when you're doing this kind of work to have this as a separate dialog here. So you'll see the data file parsing. That's where we process the data. Above that is the linking codes. And so if I click on the linking code category here and pick the little 3-dot box, you can see how we've defined those linking codes. Okay, now you can do it. The software is really awesome because you can pick alpha or numeric. It'll handle either. And then you can just basically select how those are defined. Now, if you're configuring these for the first time and you say, well, we'll never use an ARC PC or PT, right? Instead of deleting that line, I suggest you just turn it to false, okay? Because you might find that you need it later and it's easier just to turn it back to true. But this is where you would say, so a couple of key ones, obviously, is the start. Oh, yeah, so a couple of key ones are the start. I forgot, we've got an interesting edit here that I didn't have time for, but I'll show you that. Another one is like start PC or arc PC. These are going to be curves. One that I really like that was added a couple of years ago is non-tangent PC. So if you're doing curve work where you have a depressed curve, it still tries to keep those arcs tangent. So as that curve kind of depresses, you can get some weird like roller coaster looking features, right? So if you use a non-tangent PC, that will actually fix that. Another good one is the arc toggle. So that kind of replaces your arc PC and PT with a single code. But get with your survey crews and, you know, they'll come up with what's easy to enter out in the field, and or maybe I'm sure they already have some kind of codes or standards, but then you can simply just define those here in this list and do that. Now, a lot of these settings, the survey settings, you'll want to go ahead and build a setting, right, a standard setting, and then copy that into a DGNlib, all right, or rename that to a DGNlib. And so, like I said, when that field book is created, everybody gets a copy of that entire settings. Now, we have another example over here of close, right? So this building over here has an issue. And if I select it here, where's my handles now? There we go. Okay, so you can see they started shooting the building here and they wrapped it around. Now they come back to none. Okay, so that's the end. Now, I alluded to this earlier in the other one. There's actually two closes and they are quite different. Okay, so if I just do close, you'll see it's just going to do a diagonal line, right? And that's not really what we want. We have another option and it's called close shape. And what close shape is going to do, it's going to take the start point and the next point and find that, excuse me. That's what happens when you talk solid for an hour. It takes the start point and the second point and finds that angle or that ray, and then is going to project a perpendicular. So let me show you that here and you'll see what I mean. So when I close shape, it says, where is a perpendicular line to this first one? And then I'm just going to intersect those two. So that's kind of cool. Out in the field, you know, if you're a surveyor, you can shoot 3 points and just say close shape. Let me highlight that again so that updates. Close shape, and it will automatically figure where the corner of that building is. Okay. Good question. I hope that answered that. A lot of times, you know, working with the survey crew or with your client or whoever, they're going to have a lot of these. Well, they should have a lot of these set up and running. I'm working with Texas right now, and it's, I always joke when I was with Illinois, you know, we had 9 districts in the state and 13 different ways to survey. So sometimes surveyors are a little independent and you got to kind of work with them to get everybody on the same page. But you can see the benefits of this, right? For the end user, when you have everything set up, it's literally a drag and drop operation, and boom, you're off and running. You know, make your changes and you're done. Good question. Any others?
Hi, Tim. You mentioned the terrain files and the survey files must be in 3D.
Yes.
How do you display like 2D features like wood lines and property ties what would you recommend a workflow for those 2D features that needs to be referenced to our plan sheets?
How are you collecting those?
I guess photo, draw. I mean, it's 3D. It comes in 3D, then they flatten it for us.
Okay.
In 2D.
So what do you want to do with that then? You want to bring it?
I want to reference, to a plan sheet, a 2D plan sheet file.
Well, there shouldn't be any problem with that. If it's a 2D element, then you shouldn't have any problem referencing it. If it's a 3D element, you still shouldn't have any problem. So let me show you this. Maybe this will answer your question. I'm not sure I'm getting it. I'm just going to make a new file, but now I'm going to use a 2D seed file, and we'll just call this 2D, right? This is one of the powers of the software now, and I know you could do this in SS4 as well. I'm just going to attach a file here. So I'm going to bring in my survey. And always should be coincident world, right? Unless your geographic coordinate systems are different, and then you can do a reproject or transform. All right, so that's pretty cool. That's another reason why geographic coordinate systems are important here. All right, so let me see. Maybe why I was having trouble with my terrain model. Looks like something's a little wonky there. That might have been it. So there's that 3D file referenced to a 2D. Okay, the software doesn't care. Even if it's a 3D file, you can bring it in as into a 2D file.
Is that the way that is feature, like in Open Rose modeling, you can have the same feature looks 3 different ways, like a plan view, profile view, and the 3D model?
Yeah.
Does this mean that when you survey this data or this, like the break lines, it has to be on that and only that symbology for, plan view, profile view, and 3D model view?
Well, okay, so the way that works, we're getting into kind of the configure. Well, I'm in my 2D file. Let me go back to my survey file real quick. So yeah, what you're getting into is more the standard side of things. This shouldn't be something that you'd have to do on a daily basis. Somebody should, if you always have, you mentioned like a tree line, and that tree line looks one way in, the 3D file, but different in your cross sections or something like that. There's a good way to do that, and that's using these standards here. We'll go open in our feature definitions, and you can see this. So survey, oh, not that, feature definitions, survey, there we go. Let's see, what do we have here? I know we got some bridge stuff, so we'll just open one of those up. So I'm just going to look at the property of that feature definition. Now, feature definitions are kind of a rabbit hole, right? Because it goes pretty deep as far as how things go and how they're set up. But if you look, we've got a feature definition here. We've got item types, we've got our survey features, and our symbology. Now I can right click here and I can show, we've got a new feature definition. We can add these, right? Different symbologies. But you can see as a point or as a linear feature, it's going to be this bridge deck, and as a point feature, it's going to be this existing survey point. So what are those? Those are actually our feature symbologies here. So the feature definition points to a feature symbology, and we can go here and say structures, like our bridge deck. So now we're looking at what actually drives that that display, and you can see we have a default. Okay, so this is our default element template, and we have plan and 3D profile, so they can all be different, right? But if they're not defined, then it's going to use the default. So what I'm saying here is by default, typically we just go with one standard for your line type. But if you want that to look differently in your plan view or in your profile view, you can certainly manage that with a different element template here as defined in the feature symbologies. So that's what's driving maybe what you're seeing, where you want something to display. A good example of this is right away, right? In the plan view, maybe you want a big yellow or red dash line, but in your cross sections or your 3D view, you want kind of a vertical thing to show up, right? I don't know if you've ever seen our cross sections, but we actually flag the right of way. And so that's an example of how to do that. And we do that with the element templates here, or the feature symbology and element templates.
Yes, your 3D, but you mentioned you create the terrain and the survey features on a 3D file or 3D model.
Mm-hmm.
We referenced that to the, I guess, the plan element template there doesn't show up as 2D, right? It's still a 3D rotated top view symbology. I guess it still retains the symbology as it was 3D, not the 2D plan element template symbology.
Right. So it's based on kind of the view, right? So we've got a default element template here. And again, I'm just using the bridge deck. Mm-hmm. So in our plan or 3D, you'll see we haven't changed that, right? It's none for all our element templates here. Mm-hmm. So what that means is that bridge deck looks the same whether it's in a 2D or a 3D file. We don't care. So if you think of plan as your 2D world and 3D as a 3D or survey world, okay? So you can have separate element templates for each one. In this case, we have them all set to none. In that case, we use the default symbology.
Do me a favor and just change that the plan 2D there element template to something that looks different.
All right. Well, let's get our. Let's go to. Well, we want terrain survey. Do linear, miscellaneous. Let's do default. Okay. So now we're in the 3D file here.
And we're, I guess, top view, looking down.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter. Okay. This is a 3D file. Okay. There's a difference between the quote unquote plan view and a top-down view. Okay, they're not the same.
Exactly, because what I'm getting at is when you create that 3D file there, we kind of like want to do the reverse of what we do open roads modeling. A 2D model is created and referenced on top of the 3D. So when we reference this 3D model here into a 2D plan sheet, we wanted to see the 2D annotations and symbology, not the 3D top view of it. So you see how it's, I mean, you're still looking at the 3D symbology of, even though you set the 2D plan.
Right.
I guess,
well, that's because I'm in the 3D file. Let's go back to the 2D.
Right. Okay.
Now I'll have to change it here too, because this file has symbology as well. So if we go out here and look at those, let me try to find one of the bridge decks here. I think that's it. I think it's BRGD. I think that's it. So right now it's this kind of green or cyan line here, right? So again, I've got to change it in my standards. So each file now, as soon as you use a standard, it'll be copied into there. So, not that. How to do this? All right, let's see if I can just copy it. That might be
no, just update from the library. Right click on that.
Well, updating from the library will switch it back to the standard, right? I don't want that. I want to get out of the standard.
Okay. You want to update this?
Yeah, I want to do something different than the standard, because right now it's going to come across as that element, right? Let me see what I've got here. I think it just did. Yeah, that's just a line string. You can't really copy elements. Let me, how to do this. This is really a bad data set to show this.
I guess you made the changes in that 3D model, right? And we are referencing that 3D model here in the 2D.
Yeah, but it's each file is going to have its own. Yeah, I guess we could go back and change that. We could do that. Let's see if that. Oh. I think that was in our. Oh, you know what? I think I might have changed demo when we were looking at. Let's see which one we're looking at. We're looking at survey. That's right. That might be the problem. Helps if you change the right file, right? Yep. Are we taking a nap? Looks like we're taking a nap. I'll go ahead and start this back up here.
Yeah, I mean, while that's starting, I guess my main question is, you know how in the open rows modeling workflow, we work in 2D and it drives our 3D model, and
Right.
we can represent and show the symbology of a feature definition in 3 views differently. We could do plan, profile, and the 3D model differently with element templates.
Right.
In survey, I guess it's you guys working all in 3D. I was wondering, is there a reverse way of saying, well, while you work in 3D, is there an automatic way of doing 2D stuff?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would just be under that feature definition where that plan definition is at.
Right. Okay.
That plan definition is kind of 2D.
Okay.
I understand it's kind of confusing. You've got like plan and then you've got 3D, but plan really is the 2D definition.
Mm-hmm. And you don't necessarily, like, if you collect the edge of payment line, the existing edge of payment line in blue, you want to show it in the 2D plan view as red. Can you do that? I guess.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that again under the standards here. So for your feature symbologies, you know, it would be a linear. And again, I'm just going to pick one. Let's do this guy right here. So this is fences, right? And what is its feature definition? Survey roadway fence. Survey roadway fence. Okay, so I'm going to look at its properties. So what you would do then, so for this fence to show up in a different, you know, a different way, let me unpin that. You would just come out here to your plan and say, instead of using that element template, I want to use, well, let's do something fun, like make it a gas line. Why not, right? That might be for actual utilities. That might get us into more trouble. Let's just pick a linear. Do we have something fun like guardrail? Or yeah, let's do that. Let's make it a guardrail. Okay, so it's going to take a second to update that feature definition. Now, if we go into the 2D, it should update that. We can try that and see. So let's go back to our 2D now. Yeah, I would have to change it in this file too. I think so. have to be changed in my standards because it's getting this. Let me look at the properties here real quick and just see. There we go. Let's see. Yeah, see, it's picking that from the feature definition in this file would have to match what we changed. So we'd have to like change our DGNlib for that to work. It's pulling that across.
But yeah, it could be different, I guess.
Yeah,
I guess
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
It just takes a little more work than I can do, you know, off the cuff here like that.
Right.
But certainly can be accomplished.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I misunderstood something that was earlier. Says the 3D feature is always going to be a 3D feature. You can't change to the element template. And I was saying, well, we do that all the time with open rows modeling. We can change the way something look in plan view, profile view, and 3D model view. Have different element templates for them.
Right. And again, that's all organized by the feature definition and the feature symbology. That's what drives those. So that's where our changes would have to be made. You can see I don't have any in this file, this active file right now. So it's all pulling from the library. So that's the problem. Now,
there's no 2D, I guess, model at all with survey.
No. Everything's going to be 3D.
Okay.
Yeah. And honestly, if we're in a 2D file now, if I tried to process, I can go ahead and do this, I guess, just for fun, right? I'm not keeping this. We've got survey. If I go out and just grab one of those files, show you what it's going to do here. That's our file from before. So it processed it, right? We're here in our 2D file, and you can see it. It pulled it in. But what it's done, because it's 3D data in a 2D file, it actually went out there and made that 3D model to put that stuff in. So this is where, like I said, you get really kind of in this almost kind of endless loop of, this is really where the data lives, and it's just kind of referenced back to the model there. So if I select that, see, I don't have the handles there, but this is actually where those elements reside. So it gets really confusing.
Right.
So don't do that. Don't process survey data in a 2D file.
Yeah, the survey, I guess, is just got me stumped with just all 3D, while in the open rows modeling, we got 2D, 3D in the background running. I guess just the big question, I guess, is how do we reference 2D information in the 3D model, in a 3D survey file, you know, and display them differently?
Yeah, what are you going to be doing with that 2D data though in your 3D file?
Well, we referenced it. We got to show the plan sheets. We got to show like existing right of way, linear features. We got to show wood lines. We got to show, you know.
Okay.
These things.
And those aren't. Oh, they come in from planimetrics. You were saying, right?
Yeah, they could come from planimetric. Or remember, you were showing a survey pipe that was in there.
Mm-hmm.
Can you set when you, I guess, bring that in as a feature code in the 3D view, set up as a model pipe, I guess, existing pipe, and then when I reference it in 2D plan, it shows as a dash line, you know, like our regular symbology. How does that work? I guess how would you like bring in that existing pipe? You had annotated earlier. It was just a line but when you bring it in, I guess from your field book into a 3D model file, can you show that as a model 3D pipe, existing pipe?
You mean to actually have it model in 3D?
Yeah, yeah.
You could do something, well, I don't know if you could do that in 3D though. That's a good question. We do have, under the survey settings here, we do have element attributes. So we do have, oh, we're not in a survey file. See, this is where being in a 2D file is kind of wonky because we really don't have survey settings here. It's in the other, it's just crazy. All right, so let me go back to a decent one here. Which one did I do? I did demo here. All right, so we're back down in the 3D world. So help me out. Remember, oh, you were talking about the culvert, if you wanted to show it as a 3D cell. So you can do that with these standards here. There is a mechanism that we have. So out in the field, the guys could, oops, click on that again. There we go. Where is that? I think it's under general. Yeah, attribute overrides. Okay. So I was working with the Los Angeles Sanitary District, and they shoot a tree, right? And they want the drip line. So basically where the canopy is. And, you know, that might be like, I don't know, 80-inch or 280-inch or something like that. But they wanted a cell that would actually size to that. So I know this works in 2D. Okay, I know it works with like a planned cell.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not 100% sure if it would work for like a linear cell in a 3D. So I'm not sure you could map your pipe automatically from survey, but this is the way I would first attempt it, would be the attribute override here. And so what you can do then is say, you know, I'm going to create a new one here. So the point feature, you can pick which point feature it is, or whether it's a linear feature, and, you know, does it end with or contain this name or this feature code? And then you basically say, I'm going to take the attribute value, use it as an override, and I'm going to override it by, you know, the scale vertically or horizontally, or scale both, or change the element template. That's the one I think might do it for you right there.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So you can basically enter codes out in the field, and, you know, let's say you just had a single like point code out in the field for a utility line, right? But then in the field, you'd say, well, this is a gas line, or this is cable TV. And so you could use these attribute overrides to say, you know, if it had the attribute for cable TV, use this element template. You know, and you just type in the element template for your cable TV. That way, you know, the guys out in the field, they don't have to change their process of collection, but everybody now knows that, hey, that's a cable TV versus a gas line or something like that. So that's one way I think I would attempt it. I'm not sure if that works in the 3D world though, but I will point you to, you know, up here, we do have drainage and utilities, and you can take those elements and make them smart drainage elements, and then they will model. So all our drainage and utility tools models in 3D, kind of like the design does for plan views, for corridors and stuff.
So you
So
would recommend that to a survey, I guess the survey guys, to use those hydraulic drainage and utilities tools to model the existing pipes?
Yeah, I think that would be a case-by-case basis. I don't know if I want to say a blanket yes to that. It depends on how savvy they are. You know, it might be you have one or two guys in the office that are really good at that and kind of enjoy that, learning that kind of stuff. And it may be you have an old grizzled guy there that doesn't want to touch it, you know. So he still wants to drag out his chains and stuff. That's what I was saying. There are a couple of things that we can do. So we do have 3D line types, but the problem with the 3D line type, and that's why I go to this attribute override, is you can scale it, but I don't know if the scale would work in 3D or not. So if you just wanted to put like an arbitrary 24-inch pipe, or I guess you could do it for each one. Okay. So if you wanted to do like a couple presets, like, 12-inch, 18-inch, 24-inch, 36, something like that, you could do that. And then out in the field, they would just shoot a different code for each one of those, or you'd use this attribute overrides. And then you could assign a 3D line style to that element, and that would probably work, I think.
Oh, yeah.
But you'd have to have like a different code for each size pipe.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a problem. But
Yeah.
yeah, that seems like it would work pretty good.
Yeah, there's a couple ways you could tackle it. I would just get with the crews and kind of talk things out. And I would have to, like I said, honestly, I'd have to try this attribute override. I know it scales in the plan. I don't know if it would work on a 3D line style or not. But there are ways around that, right? You don't necessarily have to scale it. Like I said, you could pick, every feature type. If that attribute value is 30-inch, then, use this 30-inch style, line style, 3D line style to update it.
Yeah, we kind of do that with the proposed, like the guardrail.
Yeah.
We show it one way in plan view, and then the 3D model is actually guardrail model.
Right, right. That's
3D
another
custom line style.
Yep, guardrail, right away, those kind of things. You just want them to look different in different views. So those are both good examples of that.
Yep, good. Yep. Well, we'll definitely look into that.
Yeah. Good question. I like questions that make me think. Not always, but that was a good one. So like I said, a couple of different ways where you could tackle that. I'd have to play around with a couple of scenarios to see what might actually be the best workflow. Okay, good questions though. Any others? Do we still have anybody left? I heard quite a bit of pinging while we were doing that.
I have another question. Just
okay.
You don't really have to show me. My question is just if you showed us when you modify. Oops. You showed us when you modify data that can you add a point in there? I know you dropped it, but you can easily add a point if you had to add or connect two lines or something like that.
Absolutely, yeah. So you can come in here and let me see, where is that? It's under geometry. You can make a point. And so it just basically you and this is kind of cool, right? So you got an elevation mode, so you can actually take it from the terrain model, just put your point right on the terrain model, or you can key in a value, a hard fixed value, or you can pick it from a plan element, or you can say none, right? And it just doesn't give it an elevation. Rotation, but then you just pick your feature here, whatever feature, and you'd throw some points out there. There's my right away point. So yeah, it's pretty easy to go ahead and just throw that out there. So now I just come out and pick there it goes. Takes a second for it to figure out where that's at. So there's a couple of right-of-way points right out. Okay. Any other question? And this is something too, I think, if you're not familiar with Civil AccuDraw, I definitely think you should take some time learning it. There's a class called, what is it? Something right away. Sometimes I suggest classes, even if you don't ever do right away, where is it? Right away fundamentals. This is a really good course because it talks about several different options. If you're doing any kind of like right-of-way or linear geometry, plan and plats, things of that nature, because under the geometry tools here, we have the geometry builder. So if you don't like to build things graphically, you can come out here and you know, create an element just by entering bearings and distances. So you can throw those elements out there, and then at the end, you know, graphically throw it down, and it has all those rules in place. So that's another really good class to go through. I don't know why I didn't save that. So that was fundamental right-of-way fundamentals, I think. Definitely another good course to yeah, right-of-way fundamentals to take a look at. Okay. Did that answer your point question though?
Yes, thanks.
Sure, sure. Any others? No one's brave enough, huh? All right.
Thanks a lot, Tim. I appreciate you staying longer and answering all those questions.
Sure. Like I said, I hope we did some good here today. I don't know what was going on with my terrain model though, but I'll see if I can't get that sorted out. But like I said, appreciate everybody taking the time to join us today. I hope you got something out of the course, and I hope you have a great rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. You too.